I get asked all the time about rudiments from my students. Whether you are on the drum kit or you're just playing on the snare drum, they're some of the foundational building blocks of drumming. They're part of our language. And so oftentimes I'm spending time analyzing and helping a student get unstuck with a rudiment. All right, so I want to give you 3 tips for troubleshooting your rudiments, no matter what rudiment you're playing, so that you can go about and begin troubleshooting your own rudiments and unsticking yourself. Before we dive in, I want you to put down in the comment section, what's the rudiment that you have the biggest issue with? Put that down there and let's start a conversation about rudiments, all right? So let's look at this. The first place I often start, not often, I all the time start with a student is technique. So much of the time, the issue is going to be an underlying technique issue. Okay, that's why I start there. All right, I have something that I call the Big 7 that I work through with my students, and those are 7 large items that if you focus on in your practice time, you're going to see huge results. Those are things like technique, timing, groove, articulation, melody flow. There's 7 things that if you spend the most time on those, you're going to see the most benefit in your playing, no matter what exercise you're doing. So that's where I want to start with the student. All right, oftentimes if they come in and they say, hey, I'm having trouble with the paradiddle, we'll find out that they're actually not having trouble with the paradiddle. What they're having trouble with is either their singles or their doubles, because the paradiddle is just singles and doubles. And honestly, they're not having trouble with their doubles. They're having trouble with the technique they need to be able to do to perform their doubles. Okay, so let's get a good example of this, because we have different techniques we can use as a drummer. We have fingers with German grip, finger control. With French grip, we have molar stroke, we have multiple bounces, we have free stroke, we have all of these different techniques, push-pull with the fingers, push-pull, drop-grab with the wrist, all these different techniques that we can use and utilize when playing these things. So let's look at a real clear one. Let's look at a hand-to-hand flam. All right, a flam is a grace note and a primary note. Right? So this is not a lesson on the flam, this is how to troubleshoot the flam. So if I'm doing hand-to-hand flams, it's going to be alternating flams. Same hand flams would be staying on the same hand. If I'm doing hand-to-hand flams and I'm like, man, I just can't get any faster than this, then my first step is, okay, I need to find out what technique I'm using. So to do that, oftentimes for my own brain, I have to simplify things. So I'll actually hit a sound source that doesn't have any sound. So I'll hit something that's, and usually that's my leg. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to play the rudiment, but I'm just going to play with one hand on the pad of the drum. Okay, so that's what the right hand is doing. This looks identical to a drop grab or a push pull with the wrist. Okay, that's a motion where you drop it and you grab it with the wrist, right? Natural downstroke, and then whenever you come up, it naturally has an upstroke. There's a natural tap that happens there, drop grab. Now, my issue is not necessarily with the flam itself. I can play good flams. My issue is not necessarily with the rudiment. My issue is an underlying issue, and that's the technique. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work at this from a sideways angle, and I'm going to isolate the issue. So instead of going in and just like, you know, slamming my head against the wall in my practice time every day, I mean, that's one way you can get a book into your head, is to slam it. But the other way is also to read it. You know, that's the smarter way to do it, right? And so what I want to do is I want to work as smart as I can. So I'm going to come in, and instead of working on the hand-to-hand flam, I'm just going to work on that technique that is the issue. That's the underlying issue. So I'm going to spend days just working on drop grab with my right hand. And once I kind of get that cooking and I condense the motion and I've got it to where I can do that at higher tempos, then I'm going to go to my left hand. I'm going to make sure I can do that. Once I've done that, then I'm going to combine the two and make sure at slow tempos I can do that, and I'm going to build back up the speed. So the first step is to find out if it's a technique issue. That's the one that's most common, and it's the one we avoid the most because that's a lot of work. Technique is not easy, it's not sexy, it's not flashy. It is something where you need to just lock yourself in a room and work on very simple motions. The second thing I'm going to look at is I'm going to look at the underlying skeleton rhythm of the rudiment. Okay, now what does that mean? Every rudiment has an underlying rhythm, so it's made up of 2 different rhythms, each hand playing those rhythms in a certain sequence. Just like a polyrhythm is made up of 2 rhythms, it's just each hand playing a different rhythm. Okay, and put together it makes a polyrhythm, right? So you can count both sides, it's just a cool sounding rhythm. So it's the same way with a rudiment. We need to isolate what is the underlying skeleton of that rudiment. So let's take another one. Let's take like a patafla-fla, right? We have a flam, left, right, flam. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to, again, move my hand over here. Okay, what I'm seeing here is bop, boop, boop, bop, boop, boop, bop. So that's 3 notes. What's my left hand doing? So I've got bop, boop, boop, and then bop, 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 bop. Okay, that's the underlying skeleton rhythm. Now this leads to points 2 and 3. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to isolate the number of strokes that are there. Okay, when I see that skeleton of the rhythm, I'm going to go, okay, cool, so that is 3 strokes. So I'm only going to be able to play my pataflaflas as fast as I can play 3 on a hand. Because it's or, right? That is the rhythm that each hand is playing. So it makes sense in my mind that I'm going to isolate. So I'm going to move away from actually just playing the rhythm and banging my head against the wall, and I'm going to go, okay, cool. So now I'm just going to go 3 on a hand. That would be the molar, I would be using right now molar stroke, right? The molar stroke 3. And I'm going to condense that because I'm only going to be able to play that rudiment as fast as I can go. I can only play that rudiment as fast as I can do 3 on a hand. So once I've worked 3 on a hand, then I'm going to go back to the rudiment and begin playing that. All right, so look at your technique. Then we're going to look at the underlying skeleton, and that's going to lead us to 2 and 3. I'm going to look at the underlying, the amount of notes that are there, and I'm going to work that. So if we're at a, for instance, a flam accent. A flam accent is different, so it's... If I look there, okay, I've got 4 notes on a hand. So I know I'm only going to be able to play flam accents, and flam accents gave me fits for years until I realized, oh, I can't play them as fast as, say, Swiss Army triplets because it's 4 notes on each hand. That's the reason I can't play it as fast, right? And so once I realized that, then I started working on 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so I'm only going to be able to play my flam accents as fast as I can play 4 on a hand. Does that make sense? All right, so the first I'm going to look at my technique, then I'm going to look at the underlying skeleton, figure out how many notes I'm playing in each hand. Then I'm going to move on to step 3, and that's going to be the timing of those notes. So let's go back to the pataflafla. The timing was not necessarily 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. That's how many notes I was playing in a row, and the technique, whether I was going... I'm just throwing that on a different part of the beat, right? If I'm going and I eliminate that first note, I still have that same thing. So if I work that, I'm getting that technique I need, but now I've got to look at the timing of the notes, and the timing of the notes for the pataflafla is 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 1 E and a 2 E and ba, 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 ba. So now I'm going to practice the timing of the notes. Right? And I'll do, obviously, the right hand as well, because that's a right hand lead pataflafla. We do a left hand lead pataflafla. The left hand's going to be playing the rhythm that the right hand was playing. Okay? So that's how I'm going to start to troubleshoot and break out rudiments. If you came and sat in with a lesson with me and you're like, Stephen, I'm having trouble with X rudiment. I'm going to start with, okay, go ahead and play the rudiment slowly for me. And I'm going to be looking at your technique. Once we've looked at your technique, then I'm going to go, okay, how many strokes are we doing in a row? I'm going to look at the number of strokes that are there and if we need to shore up something there. And then if it's double strokes, it may be that you can do double strokes, but they're uneven. In other words, the first note is louder than the second note. So we need to work on evening out your double strokes. Okay, then I'm going to look at the timing to make sure that we can combine these rhythms and put them together. Another one that used to give me fits was the Swiss Army triplet. Years ago, I just remember sitting there and it was one of the aha moments I had on the kit. And I moved my hand to be able to play a Swiss Army triplet. I moved my hand and I realized it was just double strokes. It was like a double stroke roll overlapping a little bit. And once I realized that, it was like a breakthrough for me really quick. So taking and analyzing these rudiments in this way is really going to help you, okay? So first, look at the technique. No matter how painful it is, look at the technique. That may be a 4-month fix for you. but it doesn't matter. At least now we're on the right road instead of just banging our head against the wall. Then I'm going to look at the underlying skeleton rhythm, see how many strokes I'm playing, and if I'm playing those strokes correctly. In other words, can I play 4 on a hand as fast as I want to play that rudiment? The third thing I'm going to do is I'm going to break out the timing of those strokes and see what the actual rhythms are that I'm playing with each individual hand. But each step takes looking and isolating. It does not take just playing a sloppy rudiment over and over and over and over. It takes stopping, assessing, and then giving yourself some feedback and moving on. That's the proper way to practice. That's the fastest way to see results. Okay, you got to set up these little feedback loops that you can give yourself some feedback. So hopefully that will help some of you get unstuck with your rudiments. Remember, put your favorite, or not your favorite, put the rudiment that gives you the most trouble in the comment section below. As well, if you know of another drummer that you think this might help, share it with them and hit that thumbs up button. You can download my 30 Days to Better Doubles. It's free. The link is below this. But whatever you do, I'll see you here in the next lesson.